Rushing forth from the underhive like so much water broken loose from the sump.
Rushing through the hive, spraying through the sump.
We are the artillery spray of rebellion. 665.66 UHMR Camerat Radio. Coming to you live tonight from the Devil's Comet Distillery with the owner and manager of the Glacial Marauders himself, Ickabard.
Hi, I definitely didn't, deserve this. This is 100% bought and paid for. And this is Daddy punishing me for going to my summer home. I'm no longer dealing with pure water. I'm dealing with distilled spirit water.
What is a summer home? What is summer?
Well, you visited it. Remember when we went? Remember there was Carl. He loves llamas and croissants. He's my doormat. I told you to, wipe your feet on him before you entered my prison cell. So remember, I wasn't going to jail again, so I went to that psych ward. Do you guys not remember the last 3 years of lore I've been building? This is to you, the viewer. I'm pointing at you.
I'm pointing at you, the listener. The listener.
You, the listener. Are you not entertained by the weave I have crafted?
Oh, well, I swear I'm not being held here against my will. See, Ickabard even let me keep my plasma guns. I'm your host today, Goblin King. And I'm joined by my very special guest, the Baron of all things clean water himself, Ickabard.
You get to be the big spoon tonight. You read that very well.
I also like the insinuation that you only have your position because your dad's forcing you to be the boss.
He's like,
it's like perfect Spire kid. I don't want to run the company. I have to run the company.
Listen, I just want to take selfies with my murdered victims on Hivestagram, okay?
Hivestagram.
Well, some book went under.
Some book, yeah. Well, some book just didn't track as well as I can't think of a TikTok one. Damn it.
Simp Sump. I had one like listening to the Simp Sump.
Simp Sump. Yeah, Simp Sump. whatever it is. No. TikTok. That TikTok is the one that the Mechanicus really likes, right? Because it's a clock. Yes. So it's got to be like cog time.
Pick cock. Click cock.
Click cock? That's a different website, sir.
Well, I mean, if okay, bear with me. They drill off parts of their body so that meat is going in a circular motion. So the meat's spinning. So if we call it meat spin.
And then there's only sump.com. The Newsphere at a certain level is just you don't
have to be lonely at hiversonly.org.
We gotta and always remember to use Arconia VPN to mask your traffic from your Arbites provider, Newsphere provider.
Is the ISP Innsmouth service provider?
Yes, Innsmouth service provider. That's exactly what ISP is. Well, welcome to Under the Hive of Madness, episode 96. This is our third Sanguinala Special, and as tradition, I am joined today by Ickabard as my guest co-host. And we're going to talk a little bit about Space Marines, that thing that we don't talk about on the podcast. So as we've been covering the early history of the Imperium and the Horus Heresy, you're looking to establish a lore bedrock for our future looks into the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Space Marine factions. We've been teasing out little tidbits of Space Marine lore the entire time, talking about the original 20 founding legions as we covered.
Don't you mean 18?
As we covered in the Unification Wars, the Crusade, and now the Heresy, although we have yet to dive headlong into the conspiracy theories surrounding the 2nd and 11th legions.
No, they don't exist.
They'll get their own non-existent series to cover their non-existent.
Exactly. I think it was an inside job.
It was 100% an inside job. No singular faction has as much diversity or lore as the Space Marines, as they make up the core of the 40k universe. The lore, as it is presented, almost always comes from the perspective of the Imperium, and Space Marines exist somewhere between warrior monks and demigods in the eyes of the Imperium citizenry. They're both our lens into the world through the majority of the Black Library releases, and almost entirely the subjects of the Horus Heresy books themselves. Some of the other Black Library books, especially recently, have branched away from Space Marine centric stories. And obviously, there's a lot of stuff with Dan Abnett that deals with either the Inquisition or with the Imperial Guard. But I would say probably 75% of the Black Library releases are Space Marine centric stories. And then, of course, the entire Horus Heresy itself, with the exception of maybe like 10 books, are focused on Space Marines. And
Just saying,
they're also
we're waiting for that Votan book. We still don't have it.
Right.
They've dropped 3 writers.
Maybe that means 3 books will happen.
No. Same book. They're on their 4th writer now.
I'm being optimistic. I'm thinking that the others got disapproved and now they're spin-off stories, sir.
You know what? Fuck
Positivity. One day we will have squat lore in book form, and the Leagues of Votan book will be twice as thick as it is because we'll have a full army and more lore. Not that either Ick or I play Leagues of Votan and have a vested interest in seeing the army expand. Kevin too, actually.
He doesn't count.
He's painting up his guys right now. I think he posted some pictures, but he's not here, so we can make fun of him. Space Marines
still
are
rolling
also
for that last artillery barrage,
right? Space Marines are also the iconic symbol of Warhammer 40k. It's pretty hard to find somebody in the geek sphere that doesn't know the unmistakable silhouette of powered armored warriors and immediately know that's a Space Marine and immediately know it's from Warhammer 40k. In fact, that iconic symbol of Warhammer 40k has influenced other video games, other properties in the science fiction gaming world.
Might have influenced Dune.
Yes, Dune influenced. Wait. I was trying to agree with you sarcastically and I fucked it up.
No, it's fine. I'm just hoping that somehow it does go full circle.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. The way it'll become full circle is when people that participated in making the new Dune movies end up making stuff with Henry Cavill.
Wouldn't it be people who work with Henry Cavill work on Dune stuff?
No, because the Dune movies are already out. And the Henry Cavill Amazon deal got officially announced like a couple of days ago.
Not to date ourselves.
Not to put a date on when the episode dropped. But when this episode comes out a couple of days before Christmas.
Man, not to date the Christmas episode.
Not to date the Christmas, right?
I said to go, wait, hold up.
Wait a minute. Speaking of, during the season in which the Imperium celebrates the sacrifices of the angel Sanguinius, Ick and I wanted to talk about our favorite legions and then our favorite chapters. But what is the difference between a legion and a chapter, Ickbard? I feel that only you are capable of answering this question.
Well, the difference between a legion and a chapter is a legion is when you have like 2 loving parents in a relationship. A chapter is like after the divorce. And like you get half the toys.
Yes, that's a really good way of.
but in reality, a legion is much bigger. When we look at Space Marine chapters nowadays, though, they are very concise and tightly wound. And there's about 3 different asterisks you put on that. Hold on, don't worry, we'll get there. But the chapters are supposed to be structured with a limit on their size to not exceed 1,000. This was because Primarch Rabuti Gilliman of the Ultramarines wanted to make a book, a guideline. Not a guideline. We're not pirates who treat the rules like guidelines. He's treating guidelines like gospel. He made the Codex Astartes. He wanted to prevent the Horus Heresy from happening again. So he went to all the different surviving legions that are loyalists and said, this is the way we got to do it. The hypothetical in his mind, we need to limit the damage. The theoretical. And the practical was, we have a rule book, and if we all follow the rules, and we dissipate that power, and not just Space Marines, this happened across the board.
Yeah, the military in general.
Yeah, Solar Auxilia, fractured as well. Mechanicum kind of still did their own thing, but they've been scattered because their power has been fragmented through the Imperium as a whole as well. Unilaterally, it was spreading out that strength to accommodate all threats without overwhelming each other, like what happened. the reason they did this is no one wanted to have another Horus. Nobody wanted that to happen.
And on either side. So Ick brought up that the Imperial Guard, the Imperial Army, is a product. The Imperial, is now a product of this as well. That's why we have the Imperial Guard. That the Solar Auxilia used to be the Imperial
Infantry,
Guard,
your Air Force, your Navy, your logistics,
and your Navy,
your
all
transport.
Together. And now it's all separate. And it's
the transport does not answer to the guy anymore.
Yep.
Transport has a different dude.
And that way you never have one guy in charge, except Roboot.
Yeah, except, but sometimes there's that sister of battle who, that's the Bathiel coming around to go, well, she kind of makes sense, and people just flock. But, cults of personality. Emphasis on cults. But we have a much more agile and reactionary force now. Instead of having one captain for a chapter equivalent, now sending out 3 different guys to do XYZ. We have, inverse that. Now we have a guy who has 10 chapters. Each of them have a specific role and could be sent out to do something necessary without overdoing it or underdoing it, compared to the legions where there is this vast command structure that you need a demigod to organize and mentally, be there for. The Primarchs can know a Space Marine's name just by staring at them because it's all locked in there because they are supercomputers with feelings and daddy issues. And when you don't have that support structure, let's say you're part of the Iron Hands, well, you can't logistically run like that anymore. Yeah, see my Celestial Lions on there. For $3, $6, or $9, you can look at the best successor legion. So now we have these much more compact, more agile chapters that are in a more of a sense of brotherhood and camaraderie in theory, instead of being, this is our club, fuck you, kind of thing. It's less of a big gang of people coming together to then exert their pressure depending on a Primarch's personality flaws. And now it's more measured. And that's what Rabute Gilliman wanted.
Yeah.
Compared to the original 20 Space Marine Legions, they were limitless in size. They had no restrictions on how many they could get and how fast they can grow. As long as they had the resources, they had the de facto power to say more. And more they would get. They would get more no matter what. However, this meant people who had gene seed defections, defectivity. Any defect, I point to you. Any defects in a gene seed.
That one.
That's the
I'm trying to help you with the word, but I'm as bad with words as you are right now.
Here's my reason why I can't say stuff. I wasn't dropped when I was a kid. I was shot out like a fucking cannon and I hit something. That explains everything. Okay. The defects for your gene seed no longer being taken as highly of a problem to deal with. If you're trying to make a quantity a quality of its own, you're not going to get the best, and it's going to run rampant. Problems that could have been a minor trickle become a overnight disaster. For a common day example, if you look at any producers of like factories or farms that produce high quantities of food, you'll have once in a blue moon an en masse recall because of the amount of food being produced without that oversight, because of the quantity and the eventual odds just saying something bad is going to happen.
Yeah, you have a quality control issue when you're not taking the amount of time that the Emperor was taking to produce a Marine, which was I think like 10 years, and of course he'd produce like 200,000 at a time. But when you're not doing that, when you're producing a Marine in a year, you're compounding the problem. Any tiny in quality control, as somebody who does quality control for my job, it's amazing how small of a defect can actually have a massive problem on the final product. Like, you wouldn't think that a couple of millimeters off would matter, but by the time If you're a couple of millimeters off at the beginning of the process and there are 30 steps, by the time you're at step 30, that potential problem has magnified 30 times to get to your point.
Yeah, and exactly. Those problems would magnify. And if you actually read the first Siege of Terra book, there is a section being seen by a fresh recruit for the Sons of Horus as they're invading Jupiter and all the other planetary forces on the outer part of the solar system. They were talking about how there's these random people they have never seen before. People that are taken from the streets, urchins, random people, kids of people who were just slaughtered and then brought in. They are now being thrown en masse as bodies, not because they're space marines and they're capable, because they have enough good stuff in them with just the right amount of armor to be annoying to deal with when the actual threat comes.
Yeah. I remember that scene very clearly now that you mention it.
Yeah, it was such an eye-opening scene because it's like that became pretty much the standard for Chaos Space Marines because they lost their supply chains. But going on from that, legions were the older structure that were founded by the Emperor and then given to the Primarchs to take care of. In general, you had minimum 100,000 Space Marines in strength. And as we said, it's only going to get larger. Chapters, however, are a post-heresy creation, and Reboot Gilman is at fault. For good or for bad, it's his fault. They are limited by 1,000 Marines in strength, 10 chapters. You could do the math there. And then you have your HQ-esque people, the leaders of various divisions that kind of fit outside that mold. At least that's the way it's interpreted from what they show in the Codex.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the numbers get fudged. You can have 1,000 Marines, and you would think on the surface, okay, that means there's 1,000 dudes. No, that means that there's 1,000 battle line Marines. So your lieutenants, your captains,
100 of them are scouts officially.
Right, scout, yeah. And those are just So your lieutenants and your captains don't necessarily have to be part of that 1,000. Your tech Marines don't have to be part of that 1,000 because they're not technically battle line Marines. They're tech Marines.
Think workforce versus administration.
Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, even the administration of a Space Marine chapter can technically fight. It's a weird number because how would you ever enforce it? As an example, there are at least 32 chapters that we know of that have been at this early date, at this second founding is what it's called, when this chapter hierarchy was made. 32 of those chapters from the second founding are Ultramarines. And those Ultramarine second founding chapters are loyal to the Ultramarine chapter. So is it really 33 separate chapters? Or is it actually
33 guys in a trench coat?
Yeah, exactly. Are they how quickly could they all be the same chapter again? And anyway.
With the Imperium Secundus and the Ultramar system.
Right.
Perfect example as well, the Imperial Fists. They have their blood games. Or I think it's the blood games. That might be the custodians. Or they have a tradition where all the Imperial Fist successors meet with the Imperial Fists and they send the representatives. And they do these yearly games. Whether it's sword fighting, competitive karaoke, I don't know. Just whatever the hell.
Competitive sword karaoke?
Yeah, it's really just we're recreating 8 Mile. But yeah. The Imperial Fists have a tradition of getting together, talking amongst another, sharing information, and showing their solidarity as brothers, first and foremost. That's not in Reboot Gilman's will. That's not what he wanted at all. Yeah. And he kind of turned a blind eye to his Imperium Secundus anyways. So, fair is fair.
That's true. The other big thing that and the Legions did it too, but it's more of a hallmark of modern 40k and of the chapter structure because it's treated differently, is the gene seed tithe. So the Legions, so a Space Marine has two progenoid glands that are implanted in them. There's one in their neck and the other's at the base of their spine. No, there's one in their neck and there's another at the top. Yeah, the base of their head, the base of your spine. So there's one in your neck in the front. And there's
like
one
the thyroid area?
Yeah. So the thyroid one is removed in a medical procedure when you go from being a scout into being a full Space Marine. And that one is kept, that one is kept for the production of future Space Marines. The one that's at the base of the skull, the top of the spine, is harvested upon death, and that's also kept for the production of future Space Marines. However, each chapter has to give a percentage of their collected gene seed yearly to the Administratum and the High Lords of Terra. And that's so the Administratum and the High Lords of Terra can raise new chapters whenever they need to. And this kind of assures a couple of things. One of the things that it assures is that the chapter won't rampantly grow, exponentially grow, because if you think about exponential growth, if every Marine gives you two progenoid glands, that means your one Marine becomes two Marines become four Marines become eight Marines become 16 Marines. And it doesn't take long before you're breaking 1,000 at that level. And the second part of it is that means that some of these chapters, the Minotaurs being an example, are going to be more loyal to the High Lords of Terra and the Administratum than they are to whoever the founding chapter was.
Because can we address the weird thing about the founding chapters? If you have someone who branches off from a successor chapter to make a new chapter, they don't mention the successor chapter they came from. They only talk about the founding chapters they came from.
Yeah. You don't have like Celestial Lions successor chapter, the rabid beavers. I just had to throw two words
astral
together.
Beaver, the star beaver.
Beavers, right? The star beavers. What you've got, they go back to whatever the founding chapter is. Yeah, and I think that's because the gene seed is still technically, like, for instance, are the Celestial Lions Imperial Fist successors?
They are Imperial Fist successors.
Okay.
They are one of the unknown foundings.
The gene seed is still technically Dorn's.
Yes. However,
the actual kernel is still technically Dorn's.
The kernel is Dorn's, but there's a lot to be said and shown of each successor chapter taking on a certain image of that successor. So if you're taking, like you're talking about that millimeters of difference, if you're taking that tweaked kernel and then you're attributing to something else,
it's going to drift. I get where you're coming from. It's going to drift over time.
They exterminatus like gene seed of successor chapters that turn heretical.
They say they do.
Fair.
There's actually evidence in lore to suggest that there's chimeric gene seed, and chimeric gene seed is when they use two gene seeds, and there's a couple of chimeric Luna Wolves gene seeds. The Luna Wolves, I think, post heresy books kind of became the let's play with them a lot. And I have weird feelings. I like the idea of chimeric gene seed because I think it lets you do fun things, but I also think it's kind of a cop out because I think it also lets you choose the best of two, ignore the bad parts of both, but choose the best parts of both, which I think is I don't know.
I mean, that's Primaris gene seed. Primaris gene seed is all 20 legions.
Yeah, it's all 20. Yeah, exactly. And Primaris gene seed, Primaris Marines don't really know. Well, new ones do, but the original Primaris Marines didn't know who they were from. They were literally all just called Gray Shields. They were pulled from one of the 20, but nobody knew which of the 20 until they were assigned. Babies. Yeah. It's interesting. That's an interesting point. I like that. Why don't you refer to who you're a direct successor from?
Yeah, because it definitely modifies it.
Yeah, it's especially over time. It's going to tweak it over time.
I mean, don't do it for those who have an unknown. There's a lot of unknown founding ones, but the ones that we do know which founding, I feel like it'd be a little subset,
Right.
And I think that'd make a lot of difference, and I think that could build a really cool lore thing, where all of a sudden, our chapters, let's say Celestial Lions were a White Scar successor. You have a White Scar successor. we have a family tree of another successor chapter. We're like all of a sudden we can have something really cool there, like a crusade or something like that.
Yeah. And I
Speaking
wonder
of White Scars,
why they made I'm sure they made the decision to do it the way that they made to do it, just to like keep things as easy as possible. But like the other thing is that the chapter, from a gameplay perspective, the reason that the chapter sequence exists is because nobody is collecting a Legion size force. Right? Most normal people are not collecting a Legion size force. And the second thing is that way, if you're a new player or even a player who's been in for a while, you can immediately make your own force and basically like inject yourself into the game. And you can come up with whatever you want. And then they give you the 18 known Primarchs to choose from as like a template to start. Like, here's the template. This is why do your guys follow this battle doctrine? Oh, because they're Ultramarine successor chapter. And then you're good. You can just like kind of move on. Like that's the sales tactic way, I guess, of looking at it. Like if you wanted to, I guess that's the only real
financier's guide to Warhammer.
Yeah, essentially. That's the business reason that this system was made. And it's cool. I mean, it lets you do a whole lot of stuff. It's the reason that the 2nd and 11th legions existed back in the day of the 2nd and 11th legions, was the exact same reason. You could join the game, and if you didn't want to play one of the 18 that were specified, you could make up your own legion and just insert it in, as one of the lost legions.
Yeah. Shout out to the Space Sharks. If you go on to the $3, $6, or $9, ladies and gentlemen, if you join in, you'll see there's a chapter actually called Space Sharks. I thought that was a meme. No, the chapter insignia is literally just a shark floating towards you, like Jaws 3D.
There are so many on the screen right now.
So bottom center, very bottom center.
Bottom center. Oh yeah.
It's literally just a shark floating at you.
Yeah, and it's
Have
not
you noticed like a shark floating directly at you is probably it's the least threatening way to show off a shark.
To be terrified, yeah. And it's not the Carcharodons. I was like, yeah, we're going to talk about the Carcharodons later, but yeah, that's not the Carcharodons.
Yeah, everyone says, shout out to all 3 Space Shark players out there who keep getting like misappropriated for the wrong chapter.
Obviously, there's a lot more detail that we'll get into with the entire process of how the Codex Astartes got written by Robert Guilliman and all of that as we continue our coverage of the Horus Heresy. But that's a great summary, and it's something to kind of keep in mind as we look first at our favorite legions.
Hell yeah!
And I'm going to start off with the best legion ever, and nobody's here to argue with me.
Oh, I'm here to argue with you, bitch.
Are you going to pull a Chuck? You are going to pull a Chuck.
Actually.
Actually.
No, I can admit when Dorn does something wrong.
Mine's probably pretty obvious since I've talked a little bit about my 30k army in past episodes, but I'm a White Scars guy. To give you guys a quick rundown of the White Scars, they were originally named the Star Hunters, and they were the 5th Legion founded on Terra. They were to serve as the Emperor's pathfinders for the Great Crusade, organized into small, highly mobile units that served ahead of other legions during the last conflicts of the Unification Wars and the early conflicts of the Great Crusade. A lot of the legions fought together. The White Scars were known for their vanguard tactics and as being essentially like advanced fighters. They're highly mobile. Their hit and run tactics, that's all their bag. So they would actually be given to other legions to fight in front of them, to go in and do the lightning attack. You hit, devastate the enemy and pull back. And then the enemy is kind of reeling, wondering what's happening. And then the Imperial Fists show up and just steam plow everything that's left. And
that's the 40k equivalent of someone riding their bike past you and just whacking you on the back of the head.
Right, exactly. And during the Great Crusade, as I mentioned, they would continue to be used in this highly mobile method of war, being seen as the swift and silent blade rather than the overwhelming sledgehammer of some of the other legions. The Star Hunters were reunited with their Primarch, Jakatai Khan, when the Great Crusade reached the world of Chagoris. Jackatai having been the only warlord in Chokorus' history to conquer and unite all of the war clans of the world's great steppe tribes under one banner. And then he turned that unified army against the city dwellers of Chokorus, and he wiped the cities off the planet.
Save me, steppe tribe.
Right. Chokorus is a fertile world made up of great plains, high mountains, and blue seas, which by the time of the Great Crusade had reached a late medieval or early Renaissance period. I had mentioned before that one of the interesting things about the Space Wolves is they're one of the only legions that when their planet was rediscovered, they were still very much in the Iron Age. And I know that it's a weird statement to make because a lot of the planets that the Primarchs came from were in their medieval stages, but there's a big difference between the end of the Bronze Age and the beginning of the Iron Age, which is a lot closer to what we in modern society look at as being the Stone Age and the medieval era. And a lot of the other planets, the Dark Angels, for instance, the White Scars, for instance, they come from a little bit more of a like Arthurian, not Arthurian, King Arthur. There's a name for that. Arthurian, thank you. They come from much more of an Arthurian time period of medieval mindset. They don't come from like early Roman.
Triply so for the Dark Angels.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100% Arthurian legend right there. And that's where the White Scars were. The white or the Star Hunters, the way that Chokorus was when they found it. It was late medieval period, early Renaissance. So we're talking like 1600s essentially. If you've ever played the Assassin's Creed games, the time period that the Assassin's Creed games take place.
Ezio Auditore da Firenze.
I was thinking of the first one.
Altair during the Crusade.
Thank you. Yeah. A world the Khan had complete control over by the time the Imperium arrived. And this had not been something. He was the first Khan to unite the entire world and all of that. The Chokorus people were a very traditional high steppes nomad, which means that they have a very rich and deep warrior culture, and almost all of it revolves around horses, using horses in combat, using horses for transport, all of that. It's very, very easy and a very, very good comparison to say that the White Scars are based on the Mongolian Empire, and they really are.
No, that's preposterous. Totally. Never.
So one of the interesting things about the Mongolian Empire is the Mongolian Empire was actually the largest empire on ancient Terra. This is something that I kind of knew, but not something I had a huge knowledge of.
And they were fucked up.
I read it was a very short-lived empire, but like the Mongolian Empire was massive. It was essentially all of China, all of India, all of Mongolia, all the way up to the borders of the Roman Empire. In fact, the repercussions of the Mongolian Empire led to the dynasties of China that we know of in modern culture, essentially, and a bunch of other, all the ripple effects that came from this just massive amount of territory that Genghis Khan took over. And that's it's the same idea. Jackatai Khan takes over the entire planet. He unifies all of it.
I wonder if he followed the way that the Mongols did in history, because the Mongols had a very, very efficient but fucked up way of taking control of everything. Basically, you could be my puppet state, but if you resist for like a moment, I will literally kill everyone. I forget the name of the city, but the numbers were done because they repelled the Mongolians. They actually won. And then they opened their gates to trade, and the Mongolians said, we'll honor your peace agreement. And then they came in that night and they killed everyone except like 100 dudes to basically write this shit down for what we just did to you.
Yep.
And the math was every soldier had to kill about 400 men, women, and children combined. 1 to 400 in a slaughter that lasted overnight.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the Mongolians got to, I can't remember the name of the city, but the Mongolians got to a trade city on the Mediterranean, and the trade city wouldn't open its gates because they had heard of the Mongols. And the Mongols were like, oh, well, we've got some dudes dying of some disease we've never seen before. And they shot those bodies over the wall in a catapult. And then the Black Death, the first Black Death, ravaged Europe. The Mongolians did it. But the Mongolians did it. and the first case of biological warfare, it's just the Mongol Empire had such a profound effect on history as it is. Anyway, I'm getting into like why I like the White Scars.
This is the
So
reason why. It's fucked up shit. That's kind of baller in 40k.
right. They were renamed the White Scars by Jagatai as a reference to a phrase in the Chagorian language, which I can't remember. However, that phrase also sounds very similar to word white scar in Logothic. If I remember correctly, the term actually has to do a little bit more with like how wheat passes over or passes through your hand, or how wind passes through wheat. That's what the actual like Chagoris word that sounds like white scar means. It has to do with like their method of warfare. They pass through the wheat. They separate as they pass through. That's what it actually means.
That's pretty baller.
Yeah. But in Logothic, it sounds like white scars. And since the Legion performs ritual scarification, the name stuck in the mind of the Imperiums as a whole for that different reason.
It's a great time to remind everyone that allegedly Bulgrim was supposed to land on Trigoris with all the ritual body fuck up modifications. Keep that in mind for later, ladies and gentlemen.
There's a couple of like Primarchs were supposed to end up on different planets.
Oh, Kegaruk.
When the Khan took command of the Legion, the Star Hunters had been extremely far-flung among the stars. As I mentioned earlier, it's because a lot of times they were actually running vanguards for other Legion's assaults. And much like the tribes of his homeworld, Jagatai needed to bring them all together into a distinct battle group. And these separate battle groups referred to themselves as brotherhoods. And this was actually something that he allowed them to keep. The White Scars don't organize as companies, they organize as brotherhoods, and they all organize under a different Khan, and all of those Khans swear fealty to Jagatai. And it's a very specific, like just different structure. But basically, to get to the point is that unlike some of the other legions, the Khan specifically wanted to intermix all of his Terraborn White Scars with all of his Chagoris White Scars, making sure that they saw themselves as one cohesive army. Even if they kept their separate brotherhoods, they would still see the company that they worked with as being all people of Chagoris, even if they were Terranborn. It was really, really important to him that they were one force rather than what happened in a lot of other cases where the Terranborn kind of always had this separate but equal status, and not separate but equal lesser than, separate but equal kind of greater than status, depending on the legion. That the Terranborn were kind of revered differently. They were hated and revered at the same time. It's kind of weird. And the Khan didn't want that. He wanted to make sure that they all fit with one another and they all worked out. And a lot of these traditions that were established have reflected into the modern day 40k look of both the White Scars chapter and most of its successors. It's really easy to tell most of the successor chapters from the White Scars because they very much are still White Scars. It's almost like a brotherhood of White Scars got big enough and they got their own chapter. It's a little bit less like they made a chapter from White Scars. It's kind of a opposite way of getting to the same place. While the warriors of the White Scars are fierce and savage, they are also refined with arts and the traditions passed down by Jagatai, and they are tempered and bound by honor and justice. So they're seen as these savage, fierce warriors that do these lightning strikes and are more apt to cut you down than have a conversation with you. They're more apt to murder the firstborn males of a city to force compliance than they are to come to the table and talk to you. But they're also masters in calligraphy. They know they know and follow and continue to practice some of the ancient art, like plays and stuff of Terra and stuff like that. So they've got this like dual-sided coin.
And just for Kevin, because I know he'll say it if he was here, and they have that amazing throat singing thing.
Yeah, that heavy metal side. They're also known for being very reclusive from the Imperium as a whole. When they joined the Imperium, they always kept to themselves. They always kind of stepped away and stepped aside. The Khan was ready to found his own empire at the drop of a hat. He didn't necessarily like what was happening in the Empire, and he always kind of kept all of his brother Primarchs at arm's length, and he kind of even kept the Emperor at arm's length. In fact, Malkador came to Jagatai at one point and told him you need to probably keep your Stormseers doing what they're doing because we might need them to be what they are later. And you might want to look at talking to your brothers and figuring out which of your brothers also utilize more warp magic, essentially. Because of this, there's a lot of traditions and superstitions in the White Scars that kind of seem to fly in the face of the Imperial truth. They also didn't necessarily follow the Council of Nicaea's edicts to the letter. They are one of the chapters that kind of didn't listen. They're also kind of one of the chapters that didn't really listen to the Codex Astartes when it came out.
It's weird because the Codex Astartes kind of fits the way that they were originally. Bunch of clustered out, fragmented dudes in small numbers going out and just raiding people. That sounds exactly like what you would want on the, the Eye of Terror nowadays.
Yeah, they followed it the way they wanted to follow it. They didn't follow it the way that Roboot wanted them to follow it.
Just like how the Space Wolves did it with their 13 hunting groups.
Exactly. Because of this, the White Scars were seen as an outlier during the heresy, and their separatist nature and a lot of their traditions seem to put them a little bit more in line with Horus and Logar's forces than the Emperor. But at the end of the day, that same rebellious streak that ran through the Space Wolves also touched the White Scars. And in both cases, both of them sided with the Emperor. They sided with loyalty and the Emperor. The rebellious streak wasn't necessarily rebellion against the Emperor. It was just a rebellious streak, which is a big difference. It's not, I hate you, Dad. It's I want to be my own person. Let me be my own person.
Yeah, it's chaotic good if you're to take the alignment chart of memes for it.
Like D&D. Yeah, I like it. And then, as you mentioned, there's a lot of similarities between the Space Wolves and the White Scars, and even the Luna Wolves to a certain perspective. There's a lot of crossover between those three legions. Their colors are white and red with a little bit of gold thrown in. This hasn't changed at all since their founding, which is pretty rare. Most of the Space Marine armies, that whatever their colors were when they were their original name, their colors changed when they adopted their new name. And in a lot of cases, even through the years marching towards, they've changed. The Ultramarines are another example of a legion that their colors really haven't changed their entire time. But in a lot of other cases, there are distinct differences, or the chapter has changed. The chapter doesn't have the original Legion colors. There's just little tweaks here and there. They don't use the standard Astartes company and squad markings. Instead, the right leg holds a pattern in red, which indicates their company, and the left knee holds a design also in red that indicates their squad. These patterns are normally in the form of lightning bolts. Their squads carry specialty symbols like battle line, close support, fire support, veteran, and command, like the rest of the Astartes, and they use the standard symbols on the right shoulder pad. Although sometimes the right shoulder pad, the right pauldron, is painted entirely red. And in the cases where it's painted entirely red, the symbol is white. In the cases where it's white, it's red. Pretty simple. Certain helmets also hold tribal markings and paint jobs, but these are also not readily legible to any outside of the chapter and might signify anything from veteran status to number of kills and even specific battle honors. So unlike most other chapters where like red helmets mean this, red helmet with white means this or whatever, the White Scars helmets have nothing to do with like rank or position on the field. It's literally just whatever is important to them. And that's
nothing
lot of
about
the White
chapter
Scars.
Formation. It's all about the razzle dazzle.
It's all about the razzle dazzle. So I was initially drawn to them for a few different reasons. First off, as you guys probably got as I was talking about their history, I have a very big interest in the real world history of the Mongolian Empire, and especially this time period. The fall of the Bronze Age, the rise of the Iron Age, and into like the middle medieval period is something that's always been a little bit more interesting to me than any other time period. I realize that's a huge stretch of time. I also think that there's a lot of romance that comes out of the idea of horsebound people that live their life in the saddle. I mean, we see it with stories like this, and we see it with cowboys of the American West.
From knights or messengers, people who ride off in the night, bards. What do they ride off in? What do knights and paladins in fiction, what do they call upon?
They're noble steeds. And I worked as a ranch hand for the first 4 years of my working life. So I have a lot of like connection to the history and a lot of connection to like the idea of like horse warriors. From a tabletop angle, I'm a huge fan of the in-your-face swift attack actions, even if it's not the way to play my army. I'm just a very aggressive player, and I like the fact that the white scars kind of like get in there, hit, fall back, get in there, hit again. It's all about that cycle, just constantly pushing that super aggressive tendency, pushing your
cycle of
opponent
violence.
where you want them. However, as I've gotten a lot deeper into the lore, I'm finding that my personality and a lot of other things really kind of mesh with a lot of this stuff too. It's interesting how like when you kind of finally choose a chapter, in a lot of ways you start to notice stuff. So we know my favorite legion. What is your favorite legion, sir?
It's the Alpha Legion. It's Imperial Fists.
I'm
Alpha
actually
Legion,
surprised you didn't do Alpha Legion, to tell you the truth.
I love Alpha Legion. They're a close second to the Imperial Fists.
It's like me and the Luna Wolves.
Yeah. It's just there, but there's just something. I just think it's neat. There's some fun lore about the Imperial Fists that we'll get into in a little bit. We'll do it now. Fuck it, we'll do it live. So
this is your moment, sir.
This is my moment. I don't know how that song goes. So the Imperial Fists are the 7th Legion. 7th Legion is very interesting. They stayed the Imperial Fists from their inception. There's actually not there's an oddly detailed but small amount of information about the Imperial Fists during the Unification Wars. During the Unification Wars, you can actually see that their armor was a dull steel color,
Yep.
but the shoulder pad in the right arm was, the Imperial Fist, yellow and black. The important thing to note, more for the modern day chapter equivalent of them, the trim on the shoulder pads defines which company they're in. That's their marker for it. Otherwise, it's your standard de facto black trim everywhere else.
Got it.
Imperial Fists are interesting. They're the only chapter legion at this point, who override any de facto recruitment from the home continents of Terra. They can grab from everywhere and anyone, regardless of who has what land claim for their legions while they were being built. So you could have an Imperial Fist who is from the Himalayas. You can have an Imperial Fist from Mercia. And they'll be hanging out together, drinking, whatever they would drink.
Unfortunately, I have now heard it pronounced several times, and it's the original way that I used to pronounce it. Not Mercia. America.
Fuck
I'm
yeah.
A little disappointed.
I mean, it's just America. Fuck yeah, but Mercia. That's our thing. I say our like I did anything to cause it.
In spirit, you were here, I'm sure, with the Mercia. It feels like a joke you would have immediately
standard in
you would have jumped behind it immediately if you had been in that episode.
I would have made a banner.
And then flown it during a hurricane and lightning strikes while headbanging.
Yeah. I mean, there you go. My hair's too short right now to do the headbanging. 369, you can see that I'm almost as bald as Ryan.
I'm
not by coverage, but by length.
I shave my head, so yes,
you,
I am quite
Walter
bald.
White, and another guy, but obviously Howie Mandel. There we go.
There's only so many times you can be told you're losing your hair before you say fuck it and just shave it off. Anyway.
I'm not losing my hair. I threw it away. Small difference. But they were active in the Unification Wars. Not too much about them. Beyond that, their Primarch, Rogel Dorn, is an interesting story because despite being a very pragmatic, solid, steady person, there's very little we actually know about their planet. It is a death world. It is an ice world called Inwit. It is a tidally locked death world, which means the planet doesn't rotate. It's perpetually night, perpetually day. Might be misremembering that, but
no, that's tidally locked means one side is
No, I might be misremembering if Inuit is or not, but I believe it is.
Oh, got you.
There's
You want me to fact
really
check you?
not a lot about Inuit. There is. It's as scarce as the resources on it. Basically, Inuit being a cold hellhole, um, forced the people who lived there to be underground, under the ice, because under the ice, it was actually warmer, and they were able to make their homes. They had a lot of tribes, and these tribes, when you think tribe, you think low tech, low pop. Well, they didn't really invent a new phrase. They didn't go from tribe to settlement to colony to kingdom to continent. No, they're just tribes, but
Yeah,
they got bigger.
you are correct. It is tidally locked against its dying star.
Oh yeah, okay. There we go. I'm good. I'm not a poser. Get out of the comments. Can you make comments on a podcast?
No. Well, yes, but we don't read them. No, I'm kidding.
Get out of the comments.
It's not quite YouTube comment territory, thankfully.
Oh, thank God. But Inuit is a frozen hell. What actually happened is these tribes, they grew bigger and stronger. And one of the interesting things we do know about Inuit is because of the lack of resources, lack of living spaces, lack of survivability. If you read up on the planet, they literally describe the cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers that you see in like The Descent, but they're everywhere.
Morlocks, essentially, from the Time Machine.
Yeah, but they're everywhere. And they're being hunted by other bigger, scarier things in there.
Ooh, that's interesting.
It's a giant underground ice glacier of murder.
You're making me think of ways that we can make Innsmouth and Arconia even worse.
You're welcome. And so the interesting thing is they actually grew to make a hive city on their own. No, just it became that way. It grew to become that. It became technologically there. And there's these different tribes, these ice tribes of Inuit. And you had these different houses. Rogel was adopted by his father, who became more of a grandfather figure, and trained him in statescraft and strategy. And because they have so little, people of Inuit were taught about a precise evaluation of everything around them, to the degree of utter pragmatism that it makes the motherfucker who created the theory of being of a pragmatic theory put to shame. The only theory that created an actual technology, pragmatism, created the circuit board because it's literally taking its design philosophy and putting it in technology, makes that fucker look lazy by comparison. They're insane.
It also makes sense as to why like Rogel is such a logistical like mastermind with things.
You can give Gilliman a run for his money, and it's not talked about often. And it's not because he was trained in, this high arts neoclassical theory of, hey, everything's great. It's this person can eat this lima bean, and this person can starve for a day, and it just builds up into en masse as he just gets these mental repetitions, and it's amazing to see. Rogel was adopted by the ice tribe Dorn. If you read or listen to, I believe it's the First Wall in the Siege of Terra series, Fafnir Rand goes over a great description of talking about the different ice tribes and talking about how he was living under fear that Dorn was going to kill his tribe because they are barbarians, but they are barbarians with etiquette, manners, and procedure.
I do remember this. Okay, yeah, and there's some procedure where like if you fuck up and they kill you and they let you float down the ice river essentially to the next settlement to like send the message.
Yes.
Okay. I was like, it's the cool. First wall. I'm like, why does this? Okay, I kind of remember this.
Yeah, Fafnir is really cool. Like if you want, like Fafnir Rand eventually became the chapter master of the Executioners in one of the foundings. If you want to see the rigid structure of the Imperial Fists before they were the Imperial Fists, like anything about Inuit and their ice tribes is worth a look, because it really narrows down from there. They eventually became a spacefaring civilization. It became no longer just the Inuit planet, it was the Inuit cluster as they began to go around and conquer everything. And it's unknown if they created it or if it was already there, because Age of Strife is fun like that.
Right.
They had the phalanx, something
Right.
that rivaled the size of a Blackstone fortress. And Dorn, he was the captain of that, or whatever the equivalent of master of the fleet for that.
Right.
Because he took over the entire fucking planet, and then the other planets around him. So while we have most Primarchs in this medieval era, he was already, he already won the science category of civilization. He made the rocket. He went to the moon.
And there's a couple, I mean, there's a handful that, at least trappings, a lot of them were a little bit more like techno-barbarian than like high fantasy, or not high fantasy, like high sci-fi. But yeah. It's interesting. It's really cool going back and covering all the Primarchs and their specific lore, because you uncover some really neat things about who they are as people.
Eventually, the Emperor comes, and Rogal Dorn immediately does all the math and goes, no, this checks out. I knew I was adopted. I knew that I'm not from here. Logistically, I'm a nightmare to be here. I mean, look at me. I'm a shit brick house, and everyone's living underground. This guy who I immediately have a kindred bond with all these other people around, that just feels right. Yeah, that makes sense. Immediately gave him the phalanx, and okay, I'm with you. It was gifted it back. Might have hurt his feelings, but he had his adopted father's, cape, furred cape that he sleeps with every night, his security blanket, which I think is adorable.
An old security blanket.
I mean, say what you will about Dorn. There's, I forget which book it was, there was a scene where he and Valdor were talking about the hope of the end of all the wars, to where there truly is a peace, to where Valdor could be at peace as the defender, and Rogal as a builder.
They're talking to Cinderman.
Right?
Yeah, I think they're talking to the Remembrancer Cinderman on the wall, on the inner palace wall, because Cinderman like wanders up there because he's looking for like a place to like think and contemplate, and he comes across the garden, and Valdor and Rogal are in the garden already talking.
Imagine being a Remembrancer and then walking upon two deific creatures.
Yeah, right. And they call you over to join their conversation.
It feels, if it were written by that guy, it'd almost feel like a Dante's Inferno. Like, oh yes, Dante. Oh yes, I'm Mephistopheles, but like the cool version. Come talk to me.
The cool version.
Yeah, I want the cool version.
The version that doesn't eat your eyes slowly like grapes and then reincarnate them in your head to do it again.
Imagine having grapes for eyes.
I mean, that's what my...
So the Imperial Fists are very interesting. They are a very good all-rounder chapter. A lot of people have the Flanderization of the Imperial Fists is they are just siege, fortify, whether it's attacking or defending, but mainly defending because they built defensive structures more than attacking those structures. Whereas they're more specifically known, they were best at voidcraft. They were space warriors, true and true, the best at it. Boarding actions, teleporting in, throwing a bunch of siege drop pods into someone's spaceship and then taking it floor by floor. That was their bread and butter. Almost as good as the Celestial Lines, the Sons of Horus before they became the Sons of Horus, the
Luna
Wolves. There we go. Let's call them Space Lions.
They matched Luna Wolves. Yeah,
they matched the Luna Wolves when it came to breaching Voidcraft. That was their bread and butter. And in fact, if you look at the Horus Heresy 2.0 rules, basically they're given rules to make them all rounder, just great at killing things in general.
Yeah,
like they're surprisingly offensive for the defensive. If you $3, $6, or $9 to watch me use bunny ears. I mean, if you're buying Pokemon's cookies, you can spend $3, $6, or $9 to watch me bunny ears. Damn it!
They're good bunny ears. They're good bunny ears.
They're good. They're the best bunny ears. Damn it!
The best bunny ears are Chris Farley for Weekly World News.
That's fair. That's fair. He's not here. He can't defend himself.
I could see you aspire. Yeah, you could aspire to that level though. You got this. You just got to train those fingers.
I'm a dude quoting a dude with bunny ears. I was like another dude. So Imperial Fists are surprisingly well-rounded. Not as quite as well-rounded as the Ultramarines.
Right. Yeah, but if you were...
They lost that uniqueness translating into more of the modern era because they're the only people who can pull from Terra for their Space Marine chapter. They are highly fleet bound and tend to come in as a supporting action for people, which they did a lot in the Heresy as well.
Yeah,
but they sort of got flanderized by their own source material, which is a shame.
And it's because they got called back. I mean, Dorn got called back to Terra to specifically build Terra's defenses.
Yes,
that's a lot of where that like background comes from. And it's the same thing. The Iron Warriors are not great siege breakers. That's what they're known as because it was the Iron Warriors versus the Imperial Fists, and one side was the sieged and the other side was the besiegers. So that's kind of like the legacy that they get. But in both cases, both chapters were really well rounded and they were very good at defense and offense, which is why Rogel and Perturabo were always so close. You know, they were very similar to each other, so they were always kind of like destined to be at loggerheads. It's the two brothers that are, when you have, you either have twins that are completely in sync or you have twins that constantly fight, and they are the twins that constantly fight. Like they were constantly in competition with one another because they were so close in like mentality and body and all of that. And that it's just it's interesting because you're absolutely right. Like we've labeled one of those legions as the legion that builds strongholds, and the other legion is the legion that breaks strongholds. But if you look at what they actually did, in both cases, they were utilized to do both things because their Primarchs are both logistical, like masterminds. That's what they're good at. They're good at logistics. They're good at calculations.
Yeah, where to differentiate and specify just that by it's a minute thing in it, but it speaks to both their characters and why I like Dorn. Dorn, he logistics the cost-effective ratio of resources and how well they can be manned. Perturabo looks at the cost-effective ratio of corpses that have yet to be made corpses.
Yeah, Perturabo always looks at how to solve the equation. Dorn looks at how to solve the equation neatly. Perturabo looks at how to solve the equation. It's like a...
Perturabo is the guy you want leading a group.
Yeah, it's
like
the brute force.
When it's like, imagine you're on a planet and there's one like state, like let's say like a like 5 square miles of land. You're gonna want Perturabo there from the beginning when it's rough because he's gonna be able to say, "Oh, XYZ thing." Dorn adapted to that, I should say, during the Siege of Terra, but he wasn't like throwing bodies at it. Yeah, you want Dorn when things are going great. And even when they're going bad, you still want Dorn. You want Perturabo when everyone can be classified as expendable.
Yeah, Perturabo is the ends justify the means to a T.
Oh yeah,
yeah. They're interesting. The two of them are interesting characters, and it's interesting how like the legacy of the lore has kind of set them against one another.
I'm so excited for the Iron Cage book eventually.
Oh yeah, I had a question for you about the not the Iron Warriors, about the Imperial Fists, and I completely forgot what it was. I hate that. I'm like, I got a question for you, and it's gone. It is fluttered away.
What if I say the word Flanderization for a third time? Will that?
No, I don't think it was the word. I don't think it was the word Flanderization. Their most famous successor chapter is the Black Templar.
Yes, it is. The Black Templars are their most
really weird, considering that the Imperial Fists were the least prone to religious flights of fancy.
Well, that's a good thing to bring up because in the Legion, every Legion had like their special like subculture inside that Legion. Because when you hit that mass of a size, you're gonna have people who specialize in a certain way. Dark Angels were built that way on purpose. That's why you had your Iron Wing, your Dread Wing,
Right.
Your Green Wing, your Death Wing, Raven Wing. They were built like that on purpose. And some of them more culturally became that way. Like the Black Templars were sword brethren. They were people who were led by a person named Sigismund who believed in your oaths and your vows, and eventually those oaths and vows went hand in hand with the idea of, well, these vows, they give me this strength I can find in myself, the same strength and comfort I find in the Emperor. And when you have a 20-foot tall glowing guy who can make an entire planet kneel like he's fucking Kang the goddamn Conqueror, I can forgive that. But Dorn is a
Yeah.
purist.
Yeah. It's and those two come to loggerheads too. Even within his own legion.
Yeah, it's insane.
Man, I have to reread the first wall because that was such a good book.
It
You're
blew my
making
mind,
me.
especially the ending.
Yeah.
On the actual phalanx, which brings up an interesting thing. When you guys talked about the Council of Nicaea, there
Yep.
was an interesting thing brought up about how uh, people were like, "Yeah, well, Dorn locked up all the librarians and basically let them die off." No,
Yeah,
they were
they were like
there.
in monk seclusion. They were
They were in
basically
monk seclusion,
yeah.
ready to be released at a moment's notice.
They were
Which is,
meditating to keep their cool. Yeah,
yeah,
that when we get
they
to
were
that whole
iced.
part of the phalanx conflict, which
Oh, it's
is
so good.
fucking baller.
It's so good. It's my
We
favorite
got
part of the book.
we got a couple of characters to talk about before that. We haven't talked about Euphrates Keeler at all yet, and she's
Or
super
Mercedes
important to.
Autoton or anything like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's a as we get through the Battle of Calth, and as then we start to look at like the Remembrancer Order and the different things that happened during the heresy that like set up the Siege of Terra. There are some mind blowing things that happen. I mean, it's a space opera. It's an evolving, ever changing, ever expanding space opera.
yeah. And if there's one reason to read Horus Heresy, I get it. I like Xenos races. I like chaos, but not this branch of it. I mean, like the actual demons themselves and the greater
Right.
courts of them. Horus Heresy is a great read because, sure, it's mainly Imperium focused. However, it is a space opera, an epic in the stars that shows you why you hate your enemy in that case. And I think it's
Yeah.
worthwhile in that sense.
There's just a couple of parts that get kind of somebody summed it up really well a couple of days ago that like at times it just turns into bolter porn, and I'm like, it really does turn into bolter porn at points.
That's
And
fair.
and that's not a fault of the story as a whole. The story as a whole is pretty good. It's just
When you
you
have
know,
a war of brothers, you're
yeah.
gonna romanticize the gunplay.
It's learning how, and this is just a tip to authors in general. And I'm not I only have one published
This man
book.
is this published author. You listen to his authority.
That's true. And I do have a published book. I'm the illustrator, but it's still published. But one of the things to kind of pay attention to in public speaking, but you also want to pay attention to it in creative writing, is you want to spend like 15% of your time. So if you're giving an hour long talk, you want to spend less than 10 minutes of your speech talking about the problem. So you want to identify the problem, you want to explore the problem, but then you want to spend the majority of the time, the other 50 minutes, talking about the solution. And that it kind of happens in creative writing too. You want to identify the conflict between the antagonist and the protagonist, and you want to put stakes to it. And then you want to have a set of rising actions that lead to a resolution. And then you want to have that resolution play out into the climax of the story, the payoff. Essentially, we've gone through the trials and tribulations, we've been tested, and now we're at a point where resolution can happen. And when a series is created, whatever that series is, be it Star Wars, be it Star Trek, be it Warhammer 40k, it doesn't really matter. There comes a point where they have to continuously make new problems to explain new solutions to over and over and over again without getting to the climax or the resolution portion of the story, because there is a mechanism of selling more books that has outpaced the mechanism of telling good story. And as a podcast that kind of like harkens on and champions creative writing, try to keep that in mind, is that like you're not a book, people should not set out to be a book mill, you know. And I have a feeling there is really good stuff in the Horus Heresy, and there's books that were book milled in the Horus Heresy. And I have
like the newest End of Death.
there's a couple of them that I'm just like, why is this here? This is a footnote on a wiki page. Why the fuck is it a 400-page book?
And we don't have a book about Inuit.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You don't have a book. There's books that are completely missing that would make sense, and then there's things that get talked about that are essentially like copy paste. Right? We copy paste the red guys versus the blue guys to be the gray guys versus the yellow guys. Okay, great. I've read this conflict already. And like I like that stuff too. There are plenty of military science fiction fantasy series that I have read that like I just want to read the next battle. But I would also say that those series are like 10 books long. not what are we at? Like 85 books or something in the Heresy now? And it's
that
daunting.
also begs the question of how many authors for like that series, like that 10-book series, how many authors are writing between those 10 books compared to like how many authors you have for like the Black Library.
That's true. Because it's usually like one author versus several authors. But at the same time, I will stipulate that a couple of those like brain candy books series that I've read, they're like 150-page books. So when you read 10 150-page books, it's not as bad as reading 85 350-page books, you know. And there are definitely massive standouts in the Horus Heresy. There are books that far surpass standalone fiction that I've read.
There's a reason people recommend reading specific books in a series, cherry picking which ones.
Yeah.
Because they're just good enough to stand on their own.
And it's not, and there's nothing wrong with, from my perspective, sometimes it drags. And Space Marines can also be really boring characters. Space Marines don't really change. That's kind of their nature. And as humans who have been trained by an entertainment industry, as we have been trained by an entertainment industry for 110 years or 120 years, however long it's been since the silent film came out, we are kind of primed to expect to see a gradual shift in our characters. And it can be a little daunting when the character doesn't change for a long time and then all of a sudden changes. And that happens in the Heresy because there's that switch that gets flipped. We're like, oh, by the way, I'm a bad guy now. And it can be a little jarring. I think there's a happy compromise. I think somewhere around 40 books probably would have been the happy compromise. Here are the 40 books of the Horus Heresy. Well, here are the 25 books of the Horus Heresy, and here are the 3 books of the Siege of Tereb would probably have been a little bit more consumable. But I also understand that like the Black Library fosters authors. It grows authors. It starts careers. It gets our eyes on people who may not have been seen otherwise, which I think is really important and really great. And the other thing is like that at the end of the day, their goal is to make money. And I'm just as guilty of the other side of it when it comes to the Warhammer Fantasy world and the Age of Sigmar stuff. Like I've read all 15 or 16 original Felix and Gotrek novels, and I'm now starting to read the ones that who are by another author, and I know that there's even more, and I'll read all of them. Like, so I'm guilty, and the Felix and Gotrek books are kind of formulaic. They kind of follow the same thing. I know what's going to happen, but I don't care. I want it. I want my fantasy violence. I want to read about my human and my dwarf having fantasy shenanigans in their violent cartoons. Little world. What's up?
That's a fantasy shenanigans. That's called cartoons.
Right. Anyway.
So reasons why I like the Imperial Fists. So I think the Imperial Fists are neat. Reason I like the Imperial Fists is I like Rogel Dorn. I like that he is a flawed character. Not only that is that he is a flawed character, he's a flawed character who is aware of it. During the first wall, it's either the first wall. No, it was in Lost in the Damned. In Lost in the Damned,
that's the second book.
Yes, yeah. In Lost in the Damned, he looks over to Malkador and he goes, "I have no idea what what the warp is. I don't know what the ruinous powers of chaos are. Please teach me. I want to know.
Yeah.
Can you show me? I want to see if the strangers like me. Sorry, Phil Collins aside. He was like, I don't know what this is. I want to understand it. You're telling me all my brothers have this latent power? Can I learn it? Can I understand it? That curiosity, that genuine curiosity in wanting to know to better himself.
Right.
That first step of accepting that he is not full, he is not whole, and he is ready to change himself for the better is such a rare thing, and I think almost unheard of for Primarchs.
Yeah, it's definitely Rogel and Horus, and I wouldn't say Russ.
Russ taught humility.
I might put Russ kind of in that category. They definitely have like more of a human bend than the others.
Especially when you look at Russ's relationship with Malkador.
Oh,
that is like total like Malkador was pretty much Russ's son more than the Emperor.
Yeah, there's a lot of a lot of humanity in those three characters, which makes a lot of sense because, well, obviously Horus is one of the characters that's talked about the most, but you get these little standouts. And I'm sure a lot of it is just because the fiction hasn't been finalized, or I haven't personally read as much of it. Maybe the other characters are a little bit more humanized too, but there's definitely a couple of Primarchs that I don't see as being I don't see any humanity in them. Magnus is one of them, and I've read several of Magnus's books. Magnus is one of the characters that is very much removed from humanity. And I don't think that makes him a bad guy. I think that just makes him different. He's like aloof.
You're asking a high-level wizard in a D&D game to care about the quality of porridge.
Right, exactly. And he's probably written that way on purpose. And maybe it just speaks to who we are as individuals. Like certain people latch on to different characters in different ways. But I don't know.
Yeah, and to add on more, and I think to get a little more personal with this, Rogel Dorn is a very dour, serious person who wants you to do better and be the best you can be through a very specific way that he thinks is there. And it's with the best intent, and he wants you to do the best you can.
Rogel Dorn is never mad at you, but Rogel Dorn is probably often disappointed in you.
But it's that disappointed with that, and to add on to that disappointed with that hope of, I see the improvement here.
Yes,
let me lead you. Let me guide you. Not that, you wet behind the ears. Oh, what do I expect? It's like in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's not the veteran of like the, motorcycle gang or fishing boat disappointed. It's the fatherly disappointed. The like, I know you can do better. I know you can do better.
And then he's there to actually take those steps with you for the most part. And in a lot of ways, like I said, getting very personal with it, that's my dad. So I latched onto that.
There you go. But not Alpha Legion, huh?
No, my dad's not a duplicitous hoe.
Speaking of duplicity. So those were just short overviews of our favorite legions. Each legion and the Primarchs are going to get their own episodes in the future as we explore more of the Crusade and Heresy era. I have not said Heresy once yet, so maybe this is the point. The Heresy era.
You can get some prime Heresy in Mercia.
That's right. But now let's take a look at our favorite chapters. We both have chosen chapters with a bit of an extra flair towards the conspiratorial, if you will. And my favorite chapter is the Ashen Claws. And oh boy, do they have some primo spicy lore, if I do say so myself.
If their claws are ashy, why don't we give them some skin moisturizer?
Right. So to start this off, I have a quote.
The Emperor consigned us to the care of a tyrant who sought to see us dead and forgotten. Now the Raven Lord himself is dead. We care not to see the collar of servitude clasped around our necks once more, neither in service to the turncoat War Master or to the failed Empire.
Praetor Narit Kyrene, Lord of the Ashen Claws, 001.m31. So as that quote hints to, the Ashen Claws, in very large air quotes, are a successor chapter of the Raven Guard. But it's way darker and deeper than all of that. Originally, they were just the 18th chapter of the Raven Guard Legion, which was comprised of several thousand Astartes warriors, mostly all that were Terran-born veterans who had all been with the Legion before the reunification with Corvus Corax on Deliverance. Deliverance has a name other than Deliverance. It has a name before it was called Deliverance. I'm not going to use that name once because I don't think that the Ashen Claws give a shit.
Was it Kingdom Come right before Deliverance?
No, it was like Kossis, I think, was Deliverance's name before. Corax took it and renamed it Deliverance.
Got it.
So Corax
my joke, my video game joke went just whoosh.
No, I got that you were making a reference, and I was like,
we've bunny trailed enough today.
I have to lore explain it.
Would you like my glasses so you can go? Actually,
yes. Where are mine? I don't know. They're somewhere around here. Corax hated these guys. This blue light
is mighty.
Right. Corax hated these guys and tried everything in his power to get them killed off, as they represented a time before he was in command of his legion. The Ashen Claws is a name adopted from the Terran Xerix tribes that the 19th Legion drew its forces from. So there is nothing about these guys that aren't Terran. Not only that, but they fought under the leadership of Horus Lupercal, and their methods and ways of war were more aligned with the needs of the Luna Wolves' ways of war than with the stealth operations of Corax. By the time Corax took command of the 19th Legion Raven Guards, they had been fighting in the Great Crusade for over 100 years. Their methods of war were based on swiftness and vigilance, not deception. And the old Xeraxis tribes were seen as cold-blooded and totalitarian. And they also hadn't suffered alongside Corax and the new Astartes that were drawn from Deliverance. So there was kind of this like, you're too cold and brutal. And also this, and you didn't suffer enough with us. You weren't in enough of our Black Parade. We don't like you. You're not part of our Black Parade is the only thing I can think of when I read a bunch of this shit about the Raven Guard. You're not gothy enough to be gothy. Like, okay,
you haven't.
Chill out,
your
guys.
pain is not my pain.
Yeah. You don't even know my pain. There's so much about Corax and the Night Haunter that are like that, where you're just like, the two of you need to settle fuck down. Corax saw their methods as being too close to the slavers of Deliverance, and so instead of trying to work with them and intermix and integrate them into his new legion, he basically moved to have them purged. So instead of being like, I don't like what you guys are doing, I would like to teach you our way of war, or being more of like, let's mix your ideas with our ideas and become a cohesive unit, he was just like, I need to delete these guys. Fuck these guys. I don't want them. Why are they here? They're not mine. They're Horus's, was kind of the mentality.
Superimpose Corax's head over Michael Jordan saying, fuck them kids.
Right.
I'm not wrong.
Right. The record of the Ashen Claws is not only sealed by the Imperium, but the records were completely purged from the Legion's archives as well. So it's really hard to find any information about the Ashen Claws anywhere. Even their memory is seemingly offensive to the Raven Guard that still exist. When Horus assumed command as War Master, the Raven Guard were called back from their operations at the edge of the Ghoul Stars to the Akum Soath cluster. There they took part in the Battle of Gate 42, alongside the Luna Wolves, Space Wolves, and Iron Warriors. Corax assigned the 18th chapter to the Vanguard Assault, which was essentially a suicide mission, following a tradition of committing them to similar situations in more conflicts before this. So basically, every time he had an impossible mission or something where he knew heavy casualties would be inflicted, he put these guys on it. And again, a chapter in these days, a chapter under the Legions, we're talking about low side 10,000 Marines, upper side 25,000 Marines. These are a lot of dudes.
So this is like the French Foreign Legion of the Raven Guard.
Right. And he's just constantly giving them the worst jobs. This was seen at the time as the Legion's darkest hour based on the amount of lives lost during this conflict. This Legion darkest hour would be far surpassed by Istvan V in just a couple of years, but at this point, the losses that they suffered at Gate 42 were seen as the worst. While the conflict was ultimately an Imperial victory, the Raven Guard had been reduced to less than 80,000 effective Marines. making it the weakest standing force at the time. Also, most of the Terran-born line officers and subsequently members of the Unseen Warrior Lodges, those who held loyalty to the Luna Wolves and Horus, had died. Horus no longer held any political sway over the Raven Guard. And after the battle, the Raven Guard, Luna Wolves, and Iron Warriors were also expected to contribute forces to expeditions that would then return to the Ghoul Stars. And in the last effort to completely clear any lingering Terran stain from his legion, Korax saw the opportunity and assigned the 1,000 or so or 2,000 or so remaining Ashen claws to this duty. The number, I'm sorry, several thousand. I said 2,000, but I guess that the official is several thousand, so we're not really sure.
Which is minimum 2, but could be as many as like 3.
Yeah, it could be like 3. It could. I mean, I guess it could be 4.
It could be 350.
Yeah, it's anything less than I think if it was 5,000, they would have said 5,000. But 350. I'm gonna need about 350 of them Ashen Guard or Ashen Claws.
I need 350 of them Ashen Claws because they're gonna be a goddamn Loch Monster.
Right. So the Ashen Claws were dispatched once again to the Ghoul Stars. They were pissed, having seen how little their Primarch cared for them or the honors and sacrifices that they had made for him or the Legion during their time, only to being cast out and forgotten. They knew, like by the end of the battle at Gate 42, they 100% knew what was going on. And then the 1-2 punch of you just tried to get us all killed and some of us somehow managed to survive. Oh, and now you're sending us to the Ghoul Stars alone? Like no other Raven Guard are going. It's just us. We know, dog. Like you can't hide anymore what you're doing. They refused to choose a side when the heresy erupted and became listed as independent Black Shields by the Imperium. They
Did
saw
we ever
themselves
go over
as
what Black Shields are?
Not yet. We'll touch on it here in a second. Now,
Okay.
I don't think we've talked about Black Shield. Well, we've definitely talked about Black Shields in 40k. I don't think we've talked about Black Shields in 30k.
Yeah, because they're
kind
of a weirdly big deal, but not great.
They're essentially non-traitorous traitors. And I'm sure there's a more eloquent way to say that.
The way you described it sounds like the motherfucker who voted present at like a congressional like vote or some shit like that.
Right.
Instead of saying abstain. I was here. I was there when Horus slew the Emperor.
I plead the fifth. So they saw themselves... actually, here's a really good way to describe the Black Shields. They saw themselves as following the original ideals of the Imperial Truth and the Emperor, but did not align themselves with what they saw as a failing empire or the forces who turned against that failing empire. They essentially saw the empire as having failed them, and even though they believed in the original ideals, they had no real compulsion to continue following on the side of the Imperial forces during the Horus Heresy, essentially. And Black Shields also kind of gets used for loyalists from traitor legions a little bit. Black Shields and Gray Shields are, I don't know why 40k loves using both of those terms to mean different things in different eras, but that's kind of how they're used.
I mean, the 40k equivalent of making fetch a thing.
Do you have any other like big insight into 30k Black Shields other than they're the traitors of the traitors? Roughly.
Yeah, that's about it. Like that's even what they are in 30k.
I meant 30k.
Yeah, well, in the game Horus Heresy, in Horus Heresy, that's legitimately what they are. Black Shields are. Okay, so do you want to run some Death Guard that are loyalists and have loyalist like Death Guard characters? Here, we have a guy from the Eisenstein hanging out over here. You can run him now, kind of shit like that.
That Garo, fits. Nathaniel Garo is a Black Shield. Yeah. And some of the Black Shields became the Gray Shields, the Gray Shields being the Knights Errant. The Knights Errant became the Gray Knights.
Gray Knight Shields.
Black Shields in 40k is a term used by the Death Watch. And again, it's essentially the easiest way to look at it is it's these warriors who have fallen out of favor with their own chapters. So they're assigned to work with the Death Watch. Like it's kind of... It's similar but different. It's weird.
It's weird, which is 40k, and it's oddly medieval European, which is also 40k.
Yeah, it's a very cool sounding name too, like Black Shield. Like, oh yeah, I'm Black Shield.
Sounds like
I'm Black Shield, baby.
It sounds like a Ceramite equivalent of like Armor All. Buy Black Shield today.
From this point on, they basically faded into obscurity, being seen only nominally fighting on under the Emperor's orders, most of their efforts being seen as those of mercenaries, raiders, and pirates, until it was assumed their efforts in the post-heresy era of Reformation dwindled out as they had all died. So the way that they followed the Emperor's orders is they actually took the fight to the Night Lords pretty bad, and they fucked the Night Lords up pretty hardcore, and then they faded into obscurity. They basically fought for the Emperor, but they fought for the original Emperor, the Emperor of the Unification Wars.
Non-vegetative Emperor.
Yeah, that they kind of didn't like what was happening with the late stage Imperium, even before the Emperor was put on the Golden Throne. And then after the Golden Throne into the Reformation, they basically just stopped giving a shit. Because at that point, a lot of the like quasi-religious stuff had worked its way in, and the Ashen Claws were not about that. These are warriors from Terra. These are not like these are original Unification War era Space Marines. So they have a very different relationship with the Imperium and the Emperor than any modern Space Marine would.
Almost as close as a Primarch.
Yes, yeah. So unknown to the Imperium at large, they did, however, survive, and they've survived into the modern day, finding a home in the Astragalus system, where they manage a harsh existence among the shattered worlds. Two of the system's planets had collided during the system's early life, and the system had basically become a tangle of shattered and dead rocks. There's a couple of planets there, but the majority of it is just space junk. It's a desolate place devoid of natural resources or habitable space, which makes it the perfect place for renegades and pirates to hide. The Ashen Claws conquered the region 10,000 years ago, so during the end of the heresy, building their base on Astragalus Prime. Their fortress is called the Lost Eyrie, and it is a twisted spire of black rock that scrapes the edge of the bleak clouds that cover the world. From space, it's impossible to tell that any human or Xenos-made installation exists, but the crags and cracks bristle with defenses. The Ashen Claws live alongside the Void tribes and renegades that had infected the system, a population that they recruit from for their aspirants to this day. They continue to survive mostly by raiding Imperial stocks for supplies or those outlying Void clusters and human colonies that are close to their home system. These are worlds that are far removed from the influence and protection of the Imperium. Now, when I say that they raid Imperial stocks and supplies, but they're also far enough away that a lot of the human worlds don't fall under the influence and protection of the Imperium stocks that they're raiding are like the deep stocks that are meant for the Death Watch to find, or that they're meant for a Crusade group to find eventually. These are not stockpiles or supply lines that are actively monitored. These are like caches.
Nowhere near active use. This is your rainy day stuff.
Yeah. Or
and eventually they get resupplied because someone needed it. So it's just, a perpetual cycle of subsistence scrounging.
Yeah, exactly. They live outside the law of the Imperium, and they are considered a renegade chapter that is being actively hunted, regardless of the fact that their loyalties still remain aligned with the Emperor's original vision. As they also stand against chaos, they have found partnership among the other Astartes that have darker reputations, such as the Exiled and often fan favorites of everybody, the Carcharodons.
Space sharks need more respect.
That's right. For $3, $6, or $9, you can see me accidentally go to the wrong picture. In exchange,
and what a glorious picture, I have to say.
It is. And they work with the Carcharodons in exchange for war materials in their times of greatest needs. When the red tithe cannot be filled in its normal ways, the Carcharodons trade these war materials to recruit from Ashen Claws controlled worlds or from the population of Astragalus itself. Now, the interesting thing is that the Ashen Claws are duplicitous by nature, especially at this point. This is a chapter of Space Marines that has been renegade and piratical for 10,000 years. So they actively try to turn the Carcharodon captains against each other just to see what will happen. And they're always trying to undercut or fuck over the deal. But the Carcharodons aren't in a position to not take the deal because sometimes they don't have the ability to exact their red tithe. And they have to work with these guys.
And that's interesting because their red tithe is very much non-compliant. Compliance is optional. So the fact that they're having to go to these people once in a blue moon to go, hey, we're kind of too hardcore for this right now. Can you give us a little stimulus package of fodder?
Just like the Carcharodons are massively feared because they're like dark and mysterious, the Ashen Claws are massively feared because they're dark and mysterious. And the one way to make a dark and mysterious force even more dark and mysterious is to let on that the other dark and mysterious force is kind of scared of them.
Yeah, it's like, who's cooler? The space sharks made by an edgy 16-year-old? Like, it was like, yeah, street sharks, but like in space. Or, oh, these guys, they deal with the space sharks, and they make them say please.
Or the 15-year-old that made the edgier Ashen Claws to make the space sharks look tame.
Ashen Claw is my fursona name, and you shall respect
fursona name. That's right.
My Ashen Claw, no!
Wow. Ashen Claw, what are you doing back there? Step Carcharodon, why are you stuck in the dryer?
And it's just the fucking VTuber model lady that everyone says is the fucking Typeros. She should be leading the space sharks.
Right. So the Ashen Claws use a lot of assault craft in support of fast-moving infantry and often use tactics that seem most familiar to the pre-Heresy Luna Wolves, which makes sense. Their colors are dull dark gray bordering on black, and their power packs, pauldrons, and vambraces are in a dull red. Their helmets also carry red markings or are entirely red depending on status. And again, a little bit like the White Scars, it has more to do with status than actual like role. While I do have some newer equipment, they are known for their older patterns of power armor or mixing suits of power armor. So a lot of times you will find a very common way to kit bash them is to use parts of Mark 6 and parts of modern Marks mixed together, kind of haphazardly. The way that I did mine is they are intercessor bodies that I've modified the power armor a little bit on, but I'm using Mark 6 helmets and Mark 6 power packs and the Mark 6 shoulder with all of the bumps on it, the healing beads on it. So it's kind of mixing like essentially like different armor styles. And that's just because these guys are maintaining all their own equipment. They're not trading with the Mechanicus. They don't have tech priests. These guys are building and maintaining their own stuff.
And they are nowhere near as competent craftsmen as the Salamanders.
Yeah. Nope. They are literally cobbling together leftovers. They are neither Chaos nor Imperium and lined, setting firmly in the often regulated to just Chaos Renegade category. I really hate that there is no Renegades anymore, like post 6th. There are no Renegade forces evermore. Well, you're only Renegade until you turn Chaos. Well, that's great, but you guys had lore for like chapters that were thousands of years old that had been Renegades for thousands of years. And now you're just like, well, now they're Chaos because we have to draw. There can't be 3 human factions. There can only be 2.
I imagine the corruption of the Astral Claws during the Badab War was like
that's kind of the poster child for all Renegades turn Chaos. Yeah.
Yeah. Them and a lot of not the and the Mantis Warriors too, actually, because they started falling.
So as I mentioned before, they hate the ideal of the current Imperium, but also stand fast against the actions of Horus and the Chaos Space Marines. They saw the ideal that they fought for die, and even as and then their Primarch attempted to murder them all. So it's very much just, it's a very tragic story, which is one of the reasons I like it. It also has a lot of mystery, and there's a lot of tinfoil hat conspiracies that mix into them a lot. They exist in the Ghoul Stars, which is a very tinfoil hat conspiracy portion of the universe. It gets much deeper than this summary. To me, I like them because it's a chapter fit for kit bashing, and, you know, who doesn't love space pirates, right? End of the day, They're a space pirate chapter.
I think space tax collectors don't like space pirates.
Yes. The Imperium generally doesn't like the Ashen Claws. It's funny you brought up the Astral Claws too, because a lot of times when I'm talking about Ashen Claws, people are like, "Oh, the Astral Claws," and I'm like, "No, I said a different word."
There's only so many names in the universe, so many words.
Yeah.
And no one's going to name their characters the Rutabaga Marines.
The Rutabaga Marines. So let us know about your boys, the Celestial Lions. Here, one see punching a Evisor assassin into paste.
No, that's Vindicare.
Is it? You're right. It's Vindicare. The rifle. The rifle gives it away.
Yes. So it's a skin tight suit versus skin tight suit. It's skin. It's shirts versus skins makes no difference when it's the assassins. I'm not wrong. They really have a fetish for that.
Yeah, they all. It's hard to tell them apart sometimes.
So Celestial Lions are very interesting. They started off during the 38th millennium. This is pre-Gilman coming back, so put that plus to -2 to your era score here for all you math majors out there. Shout out to all 50,000 of you. It's like the new you're not special. That's what I'm saying. Welcome to Warhammer. Celestial Lions were allegedly in the 38th millennium were founded. However, while they're an unknown founding, allegedly they were the 23rd founding. They were found in action around the 25th founding to be part of something called the Triumvirate. The Triumvirate was 3 Space Marine squads, chapters, that are known as the Sentinels of the Veil. They stand sentinel over the scattered worlds of the region, known as Ilara's Veil. The 3 chapters are the Celestial Lions, the now extinct Star Scorpions, and the probably one of the best known successor chapters out there, the Emperor's Spears. Each one of these guys, basically, they all work together, and they're around this very niche part of the world to fight chaos. Celestial Lions are here to fight chaos specifically. They are built, bred, and designed to hold a specific area. Celestial Lions are very interesting when you have, as talked about earlier in the podcast, when you talk about these different factors and these different ways that all these different successor chapters are created and become specialized in a certain way. Black Templars had that zeal, that drive that even Rokel Dorn could stir into someone, as taciturn and as pragmatic and stationary as his rate of thinking can go. The Crimson Fists were the ultimate pragmatists, hence why they could deal with so many hordes so efficiently. The Executioners were the anger of the Imperial Fists. And you have those different types of things during the second founding. These guys embodied the nobility, the justice that the Imperial Fists brought. Through pragmatism, we have the concept of justice. Because of someone who is deserved of a certain thing, because of the way they act and the way that they perform, we can now see that it is just that they get XYZ consequence, positive or negative. And for that, they are embodiment of justice and that nobility, that having this solid ethic of pragmatism and doing better, being better, can instill into this concentrated form. So you have a chapter dedicated to nobility and justice in Warhammer 40k. How does that work out?
It doesn't.
Weird. Most notably, you can see the parallels drawn between them and Lamenters, the Lamenters from a successor of Blood Angels, who follow a similar path. But instead of what happened to the Celestial Lions, at least the Lamenters can point to their ungodly bad luck. Celestial Lions have a much more tragic tale, because it was through majorly mundane ways the chapter was brought to near extinction. Most notably, they were brought in for a insurrection, the Qatar insurrection. Qatar insurrection was happening on the planet Qatar. Essentially, chaos took hold, and them, being the people in the area who deal with chaos, were acquisitioned by an Inquisitor. Well, the Inquisitor doesn't matter. He gets away with it. Spoilers! He sends down the entire chapter. The entire chapter loses about 3 companies, so not a nothing number. Around 300 Space Marines are killed as they very rapidly are taking down and taking massive strides in Qatar as they swarm it. So what ended up happening was they finally capture it, and a lot of the people there, believe it or not, were ignorant to what was going on. They had no clue. They just went, oh, the banners changed colors, but my day-to-day didn't change. It was the very higher up people that controlled and caused things to go awry. So there was a lot of innocent civilians. However, the Inquisitor Apollyon, which, by the way, is one of the most evil names out there. Apollyon is not used for good things. Hint, hint. Said that despite the fact that they took out the heads that were causing this, there was enough of a general body that survived that warranted an exterminatus. This was noted to be a very reckless and excessive exterminatus. And most of the time, when an Inquisitor causes that, they're not an Inquisitor for long. Instead, what happened was the Celestial Lions tried to get in contact with Apollyon. Apollyon left them on red. He went back to Terra. The Celestial Lions brought some of their oldest and most honored leaders in the chapter and put them on a ship with a strongly worded letter to Terra. It was found in the warp, and they were all killed. The chapter it's like people on the level of the chapter master of expertise, strength, leadership were on there. They were dignitaries, essentially, non-combatants, as much as a space marine could be a non-combatant.
Right.
And we don't know how it happens, but we know how it happened. They got because they were trying to tattletale on the Inquisition, which is not a recipe for a long life. Then, after that, they get called into just this little conflict called the Third War of Armageddon, a very small battle.
Like one or two people were there.
Yeah, like Greg, and he brought his cooler, and that was very nice of him. Too many beers. So in the Third War of Armageddon,
to Greg, huh? I see what happened.
Third War of Armageddon, the Celestial Lions make planetfall, and they are at first doing pretty good. Celestial Lions are very efficient at fighting. They're just all-rounders. They're not specialized in anything aside from kicking Chaos's butt, but they're in the area, and they're being told to go do this. Eventually, the intel that was given to them is wrong. What was supposed to be like a bunch of Choppa boys and a couple of Slugga boys with maybe a few of the Flash Gits and their tank busters are besieging a colony. The colony is dead. And now there's like Ruka trucks and people and mech boys and all these other things. So it's a completely unproportional fight. And you can't just send out everyone to fight at the same time. That's a logistical nightmare. It can never work feasibly. So they have to, plan it right. So they're being sent to all these losing fights. And more often than not, being sent to places where people are already dead and have been established as basically the orcs' territory to be killed.
I told you that there were parts of both of these chapters that aligned a little bit.
Oh, it gets better. We are now at half a chapter capacity. 5 full companies are dead, killed. We now have word that in a place called the Mannheim Gap, there is a factory that has Stompas being made. Stompas are big. They are really big. Do you know how physically tall a Stompa is, Ryan? Because Marky has one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I fought Stomp. I one-on-one 2 Stompas to death with Abaddon. Yeah.
Yeah. It took basically...
It only took 4 turns.
Think about it this way. It takes the named character of Chaos, essentially, to take them on, head-to-head, effectively.
They are not a unit that you should ever be, even with a hero unit taking one-on-one.
Yeah. They are big and they are scary. So they're sending their entire chapter to the Mannheim Gap, and they are told they need to destroy this factory and When doing so, they'll be able to destroy the void shields, and then they'll have the people above them nuke it from orbit.
The only way to be sure.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of a Stampa next to
a Lucius Pattern Warhound.
Yeah, a Warhound.
For $3, $6, or $9.
You can see how big a Stampa is.
Someone goes, oh, but actually, if I just log on to my Brave browser.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, that too. Feel free to Google anything we talk about. It's fine. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it with your phone. You'll get an idea.
Yeah, that'll be great. Well, it'll be like, it's like we're looking at it together.
But not.
Time travel. So, they go to the Mannheim Gap. There's 500 Space Marines with the various characters and, vehicles and everyone, every surviving member of the Celestial Alliance is there now. They've already made like 5 Stampas. They're not equipped to deal with 5 Stampas. They charge in regardless, because that is the job they have to do. And you're a Space Marine, you don't really retreat that often. They go in, and they're kind of kicking ass. All 500 of them working together in unison, in tandem, taking on this green horde, this sea, being only filled not by verticality, but by density of orcs as they're cutting through them. Suddenly, sergeants, captains, apothecaries, librarians, one by one start falling, being shot in the head by something up in the ridgeline. Some things up in the ridgeline. They don't know what's happening. This accuracy, it's unknown to them. These orc snipers begin taking out the leadership. Anyone with heraldry, anyone who is trying to capture Gene Seed, anyone giving orders, to the point where it's now sergeants being sniped because they're the only ones there to actually give commands. They retreat.
Yeah, orc snipers strike a lot, especially where you don't think orc snipers will be, or especially in areas where orcs wouldn't use snipers.
Yes, orc snipers is the
Inquisition.
Is the Inquisition, is Vindicare assassins.
Is a big fan of utilizing orc sniper.
Yes.
In their reports when they can't explain a phenomenon.
Yeah. It's like the Aurora Borealis. It's orc snipers.
Yeah, it's just orc snipers. It's fine.
And it's insane. That's why there was that art we were showing earlier of a Celestial line using a power fist on a Vindicare assassin.
Vaporize a Vindicare assassin. Yeah.
And that's actually why, even for tournaments, I don't run the Officio Assassinorum with my Celestial Lions.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So why are the Celestial Lions your favorite?
The Celestial Lions are my favorite because you need... I'm not done with the story, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
No. We're not at the best part yet. We're just before it. They retreat. There's only like 2 actual leaders left. And it's very important to note, they call their different, like, to equivalent, make it equivalent HQ choices. They call them different names. They have essentially different names for all of them. For example, the chaplain is a death speaker. The apothecary is a life binder.
Got it. Okay.
Sergeant is a pride leader. And the war leader is the captain. I like to call the chapter master the pride master.
Okay.
As you guys have seen, and the guys have actually read out some of my fan fiction. It's so great. But the Celestial Alliance. One death speaker. He is friends with Grimaldus, the Black Templars, who is just winning in, I believe it was Hell's Reach or Helm's something.
Yeah,
Hell's Reach.
Hell's Reach. Yep.
Yeah, in Hell's Reach. Just finishing that up. A Storm Eagle is sent out, or one of their transport ships is sent out. It crashes in the storm. Just actual bad luck this time. Nothing in Inquisition style. Just crashes in a big ass storm.
Not an orc storm?
Not an orc storm, no. Not even a Darude sandstorm. Just a regular old storm. And so they find it and they give the message to Grimaldus. It is an amazing quote.
Grimaldus, they lied to us about the Mannheim Gap. They sent us there to die. You know of whom I speak. We cannot outrun the echoes of Qatar. We pay the price now for our virtue in the past. Celestial Lines will never leave this world. A handful of us remain, but we know the truth. We died at the Mannheim Gap. We died the day the sun rose over the scrap iron bodies of alien gods.
A message for Black Templars, Reclusiarch, Merrick Grimaldus, from Celestial Alliance Death Speaker, Jill Kakara.
Very nice.
He died the day after. He and the apothecary died the day after. They found the apothecary leaning against their only land raider, gene seed stolen, and a bullet in his head. So they have, I believe, somewhere between 50 to 80 Space Marines left.
Surviving Celestial Lions.
Yes, and they're led by a single sergeant, or in their case, a pride leader, Akene Dubaku. Grimaldus gets the message, and he and Jolkar were actually close friends. This cuts back to that Feast of Blades. It's the Feast of Blades.
Okay.
I can't believe I remembered it, where the all the successor chapters come together. They were friends. They essentially they went to Bible school together, kind of thing.
Right.
And so he, to once again throw that Michael Jordan meme, Grimaldus took that personally, and he then requisitioned permission from Helbrick to go down there. He went down there with, I believe his name was Cyrac, a up-and-coming chaplain being mentored and tutelaged by Grimaldus at that point. And they go down there, and they realize how terrible everything was. So Grimaldus calls every favor he can and restructures and reorganizes pretty much the entire front on that planet to do what he needs to do. And Akene Dubaku asks them to actually lead them in their death charge. They are going to go back to Mannheim. They are going to finish the job. He leads them. 5 Celestial Lions survive.
Holy shit.
Akene Dubaku loses an arm and a leg to the war boss. And Akene Dubaku told Grimaldus, "You are not taking this kill from me." So as the two of them are 1v1ing this big-ass war boss in a sea of Ceramite, and in Armageddon Steel Legion supporting them with, I think, a Titan or a Knight household. They are 1v1ing this dude in this mosh pit of murder. Right. And Grimaldus is actively choking him with the chain that connects his power weapon. Yeah, you can see it right there. That's exactly what happened. It's an amazing art. It's actually my wallpaper for my computer.
Nice.
He chokes him, and Akene Dubaku basically puts him down like a dog with his bolt pistol as he's out of ammo. Forced to use his knife and pistol at this point. The survivors are brought to Helbrecht, who personally awards them his several trophies of his armory. He gives Akene Dubaku this relic Terminator armor and gives him cybernetic implants to basically offset being a cripple. Right. And then he gives him Cyrac, Grimaldus's basically apostle, who now became a chaplain because of the Mannheim Gap charge that they did, and a bunch of other Black Templars, and a bunch of ships. And then he sent a message out to the Inquisition saying, "These guys recognize their own chapter. I have blessed this person to be the chapter master. I consider them Black Templars. If you fuck with them, I fuck with you." And then 2 years later, a Caldus assassin pretending to be a one of the emissaries for an entirely different Space Marine chapter came and decapitated Akene Dubaku. And that's my favorite part right there. Despite the fact that he survived, he gets killed anyways. And now there's this lingering threat of the Black Templars to wage their war against the Inquisition.
Right.
And the tinfoil hat theory of mine is, during that Feast of Blades, they're going to tell all the other Imperial Fists and all the other Executioners and the Crimson Fists, everyone. And there's going to be a long line of power-armored Ceramite making their way to Terra. And then, they had 8th edition starting and the world split in half, so that's kind of like on hold.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of stuff got kind of... The Cicadrix Maledictum threw a bunch of ongoing plots into the blender, which was a good thing. So what are their colors? Because I've seen the 2 different
they are
color
gold
schemes
and blue.
Okay.
Some people like to do... So I originally painted mine as like a dusty, like desert yellow. Okay. And then my firstborn is gold, but I'm going just for the gold, true and true.
Right.
It's gold and blue, and the essentially the Angels of Death little whatever chest piece part, that's black.
Okay. So this gold and black color scheme isn't necessarily off. It's just that these pauldrons should be bluer, like more navy and less. Okay.
Captains, and lieutenants, basically a leadership position, quote unquote. Their helmets are actually painted black to differentiate them from others. So if you see a black helmed guy, he's like a sergeant or a captain or a
Gotcha.
lieutenant.
Okay.
A big thing about their culture, they're heavily based off of like African culture. They have this, and this part of the reason why I like them is because they have this very unique flavor to them. This
Right.
little spark of ember of hope that's in this ocean of like edgy depression.
Right.
They have this thing where whenever a new person comes in, they say, "Earn your food and fire." You sit down and you tell stories. You talk about when you hunted, whatever. Talk about the time you went on a crusade. You talk about all these different things. They actually promote a loving brotherhood for each other, and they support each other. This nobility. They're what we've romanticized knights to be, minus the high gothic.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I like that. Look at that power sword.
It's so good. I love the art on this one where they have, well, it almost looks like they take like this blueprint schematic to like the nth degree, and you have like the gold etchings across it where it looks like they're doing they're like putting like plans and like all these different like equations and graphs all over them.
Yeah, like subdivision lines. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, those are the Celestial Lions, and the last time they were referenced, it was in one of the newer Emperor Spears books, and basically the Emperor Spears, the Inquisition lost their gene seed, which means to me, because they had to send everything out, I'm going to go with the worst option available, and they sent Custodes to their death with gene seed.
Possibly.
And the Emperor Spears had to give them Primaris gene seed so they could make Primaris units in their armies.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happened, like if they do anything with the Celestial Lions. And there's a couple of the other chapters that kind of ended up in that like basically all dead range. Then you always kind of wonder like, what might they do with this moving forward? Or is this it? Or did they leave it ambiguous on purpose so we could do what we wanted with it?
GW actually recently released a Celestial Lions model recently, Brother Baku. It was part of that like retro like firstborn line of like a bunch of successors. It's like he's got like a grenade vest, and he's priming a grenade to throw it, and I love it. Bakku. Yeah, that's the guy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, from the Space Marine Adventures.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, I love it.
That's a pretty dope model, actually. I like that. That sculpt is pretty good. Whoa, that's a huge picture. Yeah, the sculpt is pretty cool. I like all the grenades.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that was just a taste of what is out there as far as Space Marine lore goes. The Legions will all get their own deep dive focuses, and we will also be visiting each of these chapters and some of the conflicts that we've mentioned in more detail in future episodes. It's kind of our thing, man. Kind of getting into lore, you know?
I want the... Coral, get the lore!
Want to let us know about your favorite Legion or chapter? Get into contact with us about any of our episodes or the show itself through email at underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com. You can also join our community on Discord. We talk about the lore, hobby, and tactics of Warhammer 40k, plus other topics like Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, Magic the Gathering, role-playing games, video games, and much more. You can also find Ickabard on our Discord. He's one of our community managers.
Hi.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or at our website, underthehiveofmadness.com. Speaking of Ickabard as our community manager, Ickabard, where can listeners keep up with you and your content?
Well, right now, I am co-hosting live streams with Handicrafts on YouTube. That's Revan's Handicrafts on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 5:30 PST. We paint. We play on TTS. We have a monthly game where everyone who donos and sends...
is that the cursed one?
Yes, those are our cursed
Okay.
ones. We have
Twitch plays TTS.
Ickabard's Minor Inconveniences and
Nice.
Ickabard's Curses.
Nice.
So we're keeping that tradition alive.
Hell yeah.
We talk about many amazing things like, did that shrimp fry that rice? Like often about things that make the viewer feel old. Like, hey, Gobbo, did you know that Monster Energy drink was only started production in 2002?
Yes, kind of. Do you know that the headquarters of Monster Energy drink is Hanson Sodas, which is located in Riverside, California?
Okay, that one backfired. Did you know that that Lion King is over 26 years old?
Yes, I did. Why are you bringing this shit up?
Because that's part of the stream. Because
Are
Handy
you
and
trying
I,
to make my knee hurt? I don't
Yes.
understand.
yes, there's a storm coming. My knee's telling me it's my lumbago. No, so Handy and I have this thing where stream now dignifies us only as boomers.
Yeah,
So
that happens.
we bring up things that make stream feel immaturely young, while I also make Handy feel extremely old, even though he's not even.
Yeah, I was gonna say all you have to be classified as a boomer nowadays is over 25.
I know, right? Isn't it?
It's
wild?
very strange. It is very strange. I'm not even a boomer, and I'm a geriatric millennial, which they used to call a cusp Gen Xer, but apparently now we have a new name because the news is weird.
Yeah, you can find us. You can find us on. He streams on Twitch and on YouTube. He also makes some amazing YouTube videos. You'll also see me in a couple of those as well. That's Reven's Handicrafts. REVENN''S Handicrafts.
And
It's
are you still
handicapped.
doing
That's the entire joke.
Are you still doing the Instagram stuff or no? Has
No.
it been a bit? No. All right. Well, then I won't send people to stalk you on Instagram.
I haven't posted there for a while. To be honest, I need to up my painting game. I've gotten, like, to quote the mad lad himself, Riddick, I've gotten soft. I need to get back. I need to get back into it.
You need to get back here. What does he say? My primal edge
Oh
or
my
whatever.
God.
And then he
Speaking of
breaks-
the Ashen Claw
and then he-
persona, my primal edge.
And then he re-breaks his own leg and buries himself in a tomb to heal. Oh my God, the fucking Riddick movies. All right. Well, as always, we will have spellings and links down in our show notes. You can help the podcast grow by liking and reviewing us wherever you get your podcast fix. We are on Spotify, Apple, Google, Audible, and many more. You can also support us on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Under the Hive of Madness. All Patreon members get access to a video podcast so you can see our beautiful faces and check out all of our amazing blunders. All Patreon levels also get access to our quarterly painting contest. Plus, we have higher perks at other levels, so go on over and check that out. We are still doing giveaways. However, because I'm basically going to be in China until late January, we will probably be doing a batch of giveaways to make up for December and January, since we haven't done those November, December, and January, since we haven't done those giveaways yet. So keep an eye out for that. Or if you're interested in getting involved with any giveaways, and this is the first time you've heard of it, that's a place to figure all that information out, is over there on Patreon.
It's where all the cool kids are, because I'm there.
That's right. Devil's Comet Amasec, made from only the purest and eldest comet melt-off, harvested from the deepest regions of the Imodus Icefield. Distilled by House Costenus right here on Level 2, a proud sponsor of the Glacial Marauders.
Not like a fake advertisement. This is a real fake advertisement.
That's right. This is a real fake ad read. The Hellish Banshees of Discordance, the Pirates of the Innsmouth Voxwaves. We are 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio, reminding all of you Chemrats, Hive Mice, and some ghoulies to keep those dials fixed right here. Same ratty frequency for a dose of the same ratty-ass attitude. In the Underhive's gloom, where danger does swoon, hear this warning, my child, 'neath the cold, haunting moon. Beware the emperors, arms of four they roam. Stay close, stay in sight, never stray far from home. And read a book.
Spay and neuter your squigglins.
Is that like spay and neuter your best friend?
No, it's like it's Bob Barker.
Yeah.